And this is what I consider my second watershed moment in life. And my cousin Ray pulls me off to the side. Hey, Keith, how you doing? And I'm like, well, my dad has a terminal illness. Besides that, I'm doing pretty good. And he goes, you have two choices. Neither one of them's wrong, but what you decide can determine everything. And I remember sitting on the carpeted steps of that house and consciously deciding I'm going to choose to grow through this.
Yeah.
And that was my start of what I now call a growth mindset journey.
Welcome back to Stories That Move, everyone. I'm Mason Geiger, and as always, I'm here with my co-host and business partner, Matt Duell. How are we doing today, Matt?
It is always a great day when we get to dive into an inspiring story, and today is no exception. We're excited to bring you an interview with an incredible entrepreneur and a big supporter of Dream On Studios, Keith Sampson. He's the driving force behind Surv Payments and the owner of Cloud9, a high-end retail store for athletic wear and running shoes.
Keith's journey is nothing short of inspiring. From his innovative approach in the point-of-sale credit card processing industry to his passion for community and health through his retail ventures, there's a lot to unpack here.
And not only is Keith a great businessman and an incredible communicator, but he also played a pivotal role in the very existence of Dream On Studios.
Yes, he did. I cannot wait to share that story.
So today, we'll get into how his vision, life mission, and entrepreneurial spirit have impacted his industries and the communities around him.
It's going to be a great show. So without further ado, let's dive into our conversation with Mr. Keith Sampson.
Welcome back, everybody, to Stories That Move, brought to you by Dream On Studios. I'm Matt Duell. With me, as always, my co-host and business partner, Mason Geiger.
How's everybody doing this morning or day, whatever time you're listening to this?
Exactly. Doing great. And today we have a guest that's going to be such a blast, a just huge friend, fan of ours. We're a fan of him, Mr. Keith Sampson. Keith, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much. This is truly a blessing to be able to be here with the two of you guys. Honestly, this is a moment.
It is a moment. It's a moment for all three of us. And honestly, we wanted to dive into that right away. I mean, let's just get into the thick of it. So for our listeners, Keith is the matchmaker between Mason and I. So we wouldn't exist, Dream On wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Keith Sampson. So first off, me and my family says thank you. So, man, tell us that story from your perspective. We've talked about it a ton of times, but I'd love to hear it from your perspective.
Oh, man. So at the time, I was working with Paprotech and North American Bank Card and got thrust into some corporate projects. And one of those was putting together for the first partner conference for NAB and its associates that they'd had in quite a while. And they wanted to have a corporate video. And it was, okay, Keith, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of was thrown into it. And I had a vision in my head. And they wanted us to look at some companies in Detroit. And us being located, Matt Hoskins and I are here in Warsaw. And we were kind of in charge of this. And we're like, we don't know those people. And I said, I have an idea. And I had a vision of how this thing would need to play out, how it would look. And there's this amazing person that does this. And there's an amazing person that does this. What if I took those two amazing people and asked them if they would work together for this project? And that's what we did. So we had the two of you guys go up to Michigan and do the filming, do the editing, and produce an amazing corporate video that we launched and shown there at the partner conference. And yeah, I mean, it was, I guess this was birthed from it. And it's kind of one of the fun things about just being in the place that I get to be in the perspective that I get to have is it's just, sometimes it's all about connections. It's people the relationships you have, and then going, hey, this might work.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it seriously, we can't say thank you enough, because it was one of those, Matt and I, we talked a little bit before, and we came back from that trip and we were just like, that was a lot of fun. We should do more of that. And here we are. What, 6 years later?
Yeah, so that was fall of 2018 that we did that trip. So it was amazing because you saw in us just some of the different strengths and abilities, and even potentially some of the weaknesses that we have been able to come together. And so, I mean, that's what we found, through that trip and through that project is, oh, you enjoy this, I enjoy that, I hate doing this, you like that, and just really brought us together. So thank you for your vision and just, the networking that you did there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So cool. So cool. Okay. So now that we've set the stage with that, tell us about you. What's going on in your life? Want to hear about your businesses. Because I got to tell you, if someone goes to your LinkedIn page, they might feel like, did this guy forget to put an end date on something? He's got a lot of things going on, CEO of multiple things.
Yeah.
So tell us about what you're doing.
All right. So as of today, I own and operate 3 different companies, 3 different LLCs. They all, in a unique, different way, kind of complement each other. And that's one of the ways that I help make it work. The other one is, like, the reality is it's not like I have 500 employees or anything. So, my first company, Trident Business Group LLC, or my DBA is Trident 21. I rolled that up as my client services company. So I started that back in, I think, founded in 2010, really started utilizing it in 2012 with a passion to be able to help other businesses that I identified when I was spending my time at Wildman. There's a lot of small businesses that struggled with just strategic thought. There's a reason why a lot of startups, whether it's restaurant, retail, or otherwise, fail within the first, 3 to 5 years. And usually it's not because the person doesn't have passion. It's not because they don't have a vision they want to execute on. Sometimes they're just missing those pieces, right? Maybe it's self-awareness of some of their weaknesses. Sometimes it's just not able to break down and go, okay, where do I want to be 5 years from now? And then build a plan backwards strategically to help me get to that place. And so that was the launch of that, was just that passion and heart to help other small businesses grow and be successful. But in that business, that's when I jumped into payments back in 2012. And so that business now rolls up as my payment processing, point of sale, business growth tools. I do any of my corporate training, consulting, professional speaking, all gets kind of lumped into that client services business. And it's a company of one. I mean, so it's not like I have other employees on that aspect of things. So there's that one. And then in 2022, I always pick I pick a word for the year. Mm-hmm. And that started during COVID. During 2020, when COVID hit, I realized, like, this is the year for value. Like, forget everything else. How did we just bring value to people and give without expectations and really kind of settle into, we don't know what this is going to be like. If we do the right things, and the right things will happen down the road. And then, so fast forward 2022, the word for that year was opportunity. So I try to build on these. So when I started out 2022, the word opportunity meant 2 different things. It was, am I putting myself in a place to seize the opportunities I want to as they present themselves? Mm-hmm. And number 2, am I taking steps, playing the long game to create opportunities for myself in the future? And having that mentality and that mindset, when I got an email in the morning of February 6th that Green Earth Multisport was closing and moving to Colorado, it just hit. I'm like, okay, I have this idea, like, our community can't lose the place for somebody to get properly fit for shoes. And I have a passion for fitness and healthy lifestyle. And I kind of immediately this idea started morphing. So long story short, I ended up founding Cloud9 Multisport LLC. I literally went from idea on February 6th to sitting in my bed that Friday, jumping on LegalZoom, setting up the LLC, grabbing the domain, all the handles and stuff on Instagram, Facebook, and secured the building. Got the keys that April 28th, and soft open June 4th, I think it was, with the grand opening July 1st. And having never done retail, I didn't have a business plan. I had a vision, but all the experience of this stuff, I had this like mental checklist of like, here are the things that just need to be done. And a lot of that too also is definitely a lot of background things needed to happen in unison, from my painters having one job cancel and being able to get in there to paint. I mean, it was just a lot of things that made it happen, a lot of people involved to help do that. So now, that opened up July 2022. That's my retail business. That's going absolutely phenomenal. It's like a gigantic business and social experiment. Because one of the things I speak on is the importance of creating an incredible customer experience. In fact, one of my keynotes is called Create an Incredible Customer Experience or Die. And it's really around the idea of how do you thrive in the experience economy. It taps into human behavior, buyer behavior. And so I'd been giving that for a while, and I teach that. So I'm like, maybe it's time to execute on that myself and show that it can be done. So that business now, when you look at that, our first full year was last year in 2023. we haven't spent a dime on traditional marketing, not a penny. Wow. Like I've sponsored some local races or done some like donations and different things that gets our brand out there. But that's not the why that we do it. We do it because it's good and we get that positive benefit. And yeah, so like if we look at 2023, I'd set a pretty aggressive goal, again, not knowing retail and we're in a smaller area, of like 402 in sales. We ended up doing 460. And already this year, January is 30% over January of last year. The power of consumer engagement through digital aspects, we drove a massive sale with a single text 2 days before. And so we doubled our sales for February in 4 hours on that day. So again, it's these different components that if you strategically focus on the customer experience being the core of the business, then you stack everything else on top of that, the power in that's amazing. So like we did, I think it was 177% this February over last year February. So yeah, it's a ton of fun. And the real value, and like what I tell people is Cloud9 is not a run shop, right? We're a lifestyle store. Our mission is to help people move into a happier and healthy lifestyle. We pay the bills by selling shoes. You know what I mean? Like, so that's the culture. That's what my team is building around, is that experience and truly the heart of helping others. And when we do that, the other aspects are going to come with it. So that's business number 2. Business number 3 is through my consulting in the payment space, the opportunity to get involved with one of my clients that needed to exit the space has created the opportunity for a new company, a new Surv Payments. So I launched Surv Business Solutions LLC just in February. I had started that up as a partnership with another individual over the summer, an amazing individual in the space, Michael Nardi, who owns Electronic Payments and Sigma and Exitouch. And we kind of joined forces to help relieve this person of that portfolio. But then through that process too, we also kind of got that cleaned up, but realized we both still had very different styles and ways that we wanted to do things and different visions. So I think that's one of the qualities of when you have good human beings that really have the same best interest of others, you have the ability to say, hey, this is working and this is not working. So in a different format where you guys came together to build something, Michael and I had to realize, hey, we have 2 different skill sets. We have 2 different things and 2 different visions. Let's not do something that's not meant to do. Let's find a different way to work together. Yeah. So that has launched then Surv Business Solutions LLC. So where I took the brand and stuff that I'd built from June on, I was able to keep some of those assets starting from scratch. I have a few employees on that. And it's a wild ride, but that serves the payment space at a higher level. So think of it more as a wholesale hybrid distributor. So I tell people, like I just had this conversation several times at a trade show in Vegas, it's like owning the wholesale distribution as well as having my own retail store as well for the similar thing. So it's like, hey, I have a wine distribution, but I also own a liquor store that sells the wine I distribute. So that's kind of Surv Payments, and Trident gets to kind of feed that. But then with that Surv Payments, I get to bring a different approach to the payment space, one that really focuses on a couple different programs, dual price, which I'm recategorizing as modern pricing. So it's looking at moving beyond having a price and rate conversation in the payment space and more of a customer experience and pricing strategy. And still going back to that original passion of how do I help businesses grow and perform better and bring solutions to them, like what I'm doing at Cloud9 with text engagement of customers, and like really sitting there and having a different kind of conversation, bringing a different thing to the market, and attracting hopefully a different sales partner that they want to ultimately do right by the merchant, and in doing that, they're going to change their trajectory and all grow.
Yeah. Wow.
Awesome.
So, it's a mouthful, I know.
Yeah. So how did you get more than 24 hours in your day?
All right, so God made me weird for one thing. I fully embrace that. Okay, so there was I can't say what all it was, but I used not to be a morning person at all. And anybody that worked with me from 2000 and before to 2012 can attest to that. I was late to every morning meeting. I'd be falling asleep at a 7:00 meeting, key data meeting at Wildman or something. I was not a morning person. I could sleep till 10 or noon on a Saturday, right? 8 hours was like minimum that I needed. And then in 2012, life changed. Corporately, my life changed as well. I think that relieved some stress. But then I think it was the power of God saying, okay, you're entering a different phase. You need a different thing. But also I started drinking this drink, Zija XM Plus. It's made from the moringa plant, which is the most nutrient-rich plant on planet Earth. I started that in like March of 2012. And I remember it was probably like April, about a month in from drinking that. I'm laying in bed, and I open my eyes. And there's the sun's kind of coming through the windows. I'm going, look at my clock or whatever. I'm like, it's 6 o'clock. Why am I awake right now? I went to bed at midnight. Like, why am I awake? And why do I feel like I just need to get up and start going? And it's been that way ever since. So I right now, since 2012, I sleep 6 hours a night, sometimes less. And I perform at 100% capacity. And I know I got a cup of coffee here. I very rarely drink coffee. I mean, I'm one of those crazy people that can wake up at 6 and I can be in front of my computer at 100% at 6:10. And so when I look at the balance of having 3 kids, 3 businesses, the fact that I can fully perform on 6 hours of sleep a night. So when you break that down, if most people need 8, let's say, so I'm getting 2 hours a day extra. That's 160 hours a month more that I have to use in a beneficial way than most people. That's 2 extra 40-hour work weeks. Right? So when you really think of it in that aspect, and I don't waste time, like I'll chill at night and like throw a show on and have a glass of wine and maybe like still do a little bit of work after the kids go, like whatever it is, like I don't really I veg out, but I don't really waste time. And so that's number one. Number two, I have a constant list. And Emily, who's my admin assistant, can attest to this. She's entered the crazy brain of Keith over the last several months. But like I have a constant, what are things that I can do? So like even while we're waiting for this, I need to pay my kids' school balances and put more money on the lunch. I jumped over there on the computer and knocked it out. Like, so there's all these 5 to 10 minute tasks that we constantly have in our life, yet we sit there and do nothing with those 5 to 10 minute windows of time. So I constantly have, here's things that I can do. And if I'm sitting there waiting for an appointment, I'm getting 2 or 3 things done. Maybe I'm firing off an email, even starting a draft, or making a note in my phone, or putting something on my calendar. It's crazy.
Dude, love it. I'm a 4 a.m. early riser, and it was the same. I did the math on like how many extra hours that you can get in your day, and then you start to like span that out over the course of a career. It's like if you can stay consistent with that, like the years that you are adding into your life, like it's unreal. The power of like maximizing those mornings. And so the question how do you recharge? Because a lot of people, when they hear that, they're like, I'd burn out. Like I could do that for a couple of weeks, and then it's like if I don't have like rest or like a full stop, it's like I'm not gonna be able to sustain that. So how do you sustain?
So every once in a while I hit a wall. Like, I mean, I'll hit a point where I'm like, I'll sleep for 8 to 10 hours. Like I've just done too much. I've had too many nights with things going on. Maybe I only got 5, and my body says, okay, you need a hard reset. But aside from those moments, I have a passion for physical fitness and an active lifestyle. When I can get out and run, and I have a love-hate relationship with running. Like I didn't really start, running for like entertainment, whatever you want to call it, right? Till about 2012 as well. So I had to develop a passion for it, but it's a recharging thing, whether and there's a difference between hitting the gym and running. So when I'm running, I can listen to an audiobook. Like last year, I consumed 5 books, 1 by paper and 24 by listening. So whether I'm driving, again, it's maximizing the time, right? Challenging those inputs and how am I doing it? When I'm running, I can consume a book or a podcast or anything else. When I'm in the gym, that's a lot more difficult to do. You need music and you're doing different things. So running, or sometimes I'll just not listen to anything and I'll be free with my thoughts. And I'll be running and be like, ooh, and I'll open up my notes and dictate a note into my phone while I'm running to kind of circle back on or whatever. So running, it's great for the body. It's great for the brain. It gets the blood flowing. It's that you can, same thing with working out. It's that release of stress. When your body's performing at a higher level, your mind's going to perform at a higher level as well. So for me, that's one of the ways that I decompress and do. Another, I travel quite a bit. And there are times, depending on the trip, depending on the amount of days away, I will pack an extra day on, or even an extra afternoon. I'll grab a later flight and get in late to have 5 or 6 hours just to sit. And honestly, sometimes I'll just sit by a pool, read a book, maybe knock out some emails, because I know if I take that time to do that, I'm showing up as the best version of me the next day, especially for my kids, right? So
Wow. Yeah.
the times where I don't get that and I'm landing and I'm right back into it, like I'm tired, I might have all these things floating through my head that I need to get done, and they're not getting the best version of me because, you know, I have this list in my head. I've got it, you know, I mean, so I can't focus on them. So I have to build that time in. And a lot of people do vacations. I hardly ever do a vacation. I need to start working that in a little bit more, and I'm trying to, but I do these micro days. So I take one day here, half a day there, and that recharges me.
Yep.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so we've established that you have a lot going on, a lot of amazing things that you're doing. You operate at a totally different clip than most people, which is great. It sounds like 2012 was a huge transition year. You've mentioned that a couple of times. We want to back up, though, talk about the origin of Keith Sampson and kind of build back to who you are today. So tell us, where are you originally from? What did life look like for you in the beginning?
So I'm originally from Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C. Grew up in Prince George's County, College Park, and Lanham. My dad was a pastor. My mom and dad both worked full-time ministry. So I grew up in that perspective. In that line of work and in that area, we grew up, poverty level. So in the 80s and 90s, when you have a combined income of, 2 adults that are working, but in ministry plus 3 boys, and you're living in between $25,000 to $30,000, like, it was hand-me-downs. It was no name brand stuff. My first job was I started raking leaves and hustling when I was younger, but my first official paycheck was from Copying Products Incorporated when I was 14 years old. So I still have the original pay stub. It was I paid $3.23 an hour or something.
Wow. Yeah.
And cleaning copying parts and cleaning the office and making coffee or whatever needed to be done. So it was an amazing childhood. Our vacations, we didn't get it. I never went to Disney until I was way older. I was a human adult. Our vacations were awesome. It was people that my dad knew, like his best friend, Bill Cadu, who's been, him and his wife and family have been missionaries over in England now for a long, long time. His dad was, at the time growing up, an exec at Exxon. And they had a place on Gibson Island on the Chesapeake Bay, a private island, gated community and stuff. Okay. So we'd go there once a week in the summer to vacation, and it was free. You know what I mean? And it was an hour from our house, but it was a massive escape, and I have some amazing memories of that. Or we'd go up to upstate New York and stay with my aunt, uncle, and cousins, and we went to Cooperstown. So we found ways to do family vacations that, besides just some travel expense, we didn't have hotels, we didn't have planes, we didn't have park tickets and everything else, and that was great. That was completely fine because we had amazing memories.
Yeah, absolutely.
I decided to come out here to go to Grace after visiting it and having friends from youth conference and stuff like that. So fast forward then to my sophomore year. When I was home in between my freshman and sophomore year, my dad was starting to develop some things that we didn't know what it was. You can literally physically see his muscles twitching while he's sitting there watching TV or we're hanging out and everything. Yeah. And we didn't know. We started going to the doctor and stuff. And it progressively was just getting more irritating for him. So then that Christmas break of, it would have been, Christmas of 96. We go home. I go home for Christmas. And it's been getting worse. So he's got appointments set up at Johns Hopkins Hospital. And so I remember knowing when something was really, really bad, because when they took me back to the airport, and this is back when parents, whoever, could walk all the way to the gate. You know what I mean? You could go to the gate and hang out with people until they boarded the plane.
Yes.
And so we were trying to get to my flight on time, and my dad could not keep up going through the airport, which is, here's your idol, your former baseball coach and everything else, and he literally couldn't keep up going through the airport. So my mom and I got to the gate, he finally arrived, and I just, at that point, knew, okay, this is just off. This is not right. And so he had that appointment at Johns Hopkins Hospital, and I was patiently waiting, and we had some suspicions. But I remember sitting at Grace College's cafeteria on January 27th, 1997, waiting for notification. And my pager goes off. Yeah, back in the pagers, right?
Yep, right.
And so I go up 2 flights of stairs, grab that tan plastic phone off the wall, dial my extension to get out and sit down on the bricks below it. And my mom answers. I'm like, hey, Mom, what's going on with Dad? And she goes, let me put him on the phone and let him explain. So he gets on the phone. Hey, they diagnosed me with Lou Gehrig's disease. So that moment, you never forget. hearing that, your dad has a terminal illness.
Yeah.
And I don't remember much after that. Like the rest of the conversation is like Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah. And I remember going back downstairs and connecting with some of my friends. And we went to a Bible study that night and prayed and just really trying to wrap life around it. So now fast forward March. And again, they're in Maryland. I'm in Indiana, roughly 650 miles away. And trying to figure out, like, do I go back home? Do I stay here? Like, how much time does he have? And there's still so many unknowns at this point. And I go back home for the first time in March. And this is what I consider my second watershed moment in life. And my cousin Ray pulls me off to the side. Hey, Keith, how you doing? Ray is an awesome person. And I'm like, well, my dad has a terminal illness. Besides that, I'm doing pretty good. And he goes, you have two choices. Neither one of them's wrong, but what you decide can determine everything. And he goes, are you going to go through it or are you going to grow through it? And I remember, because in a lot of it, I talked about my upbringing. I kind of already knew the direction that I was settling in immediately from that question, but I really let it sit for about 24 hours.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting on the carpeted steps of that house and consciously deciding I'm going to choose to grow through this.
Yeah.
And that was my start of what I now call a growth mindset journey. No, I've never read the book Growth Mindset. I kind of don't want to because I have my own whole aspect of it,
right,
definition, experiences, and everything else, right? And I know people that have experienced that. It's amazing. But this is what I call it the start of my growth mindset journey. Because what I found was by stepping into that choice to grow, growth and anger can't coexist, right? So we were not happy, obviously, with my dad's situation.
Sure.
But you can still find joy in it. You can still find opportunities to use the stories to bring value to others. To, like everything became a lesson. It wasn't, we were sad. I mean, trust me, like it took him in a year and a half, which was incredibly aggressive. Wow. So when we were kind of rewind it, he had it for years before. And now knowing, you can kind of look back and go, oh, that's why he was slowing down at practice. You know what I mean? Like
right.
There were things of that nature. But it really moved through him progressively quick. And through that process too, he was maybe hoping to have 5 years, and it was like, hey, don't put your life on hold. We prayed about it, knew that my place was in Indiana and not going back to Maryland. And I'd go home as much as I could. And it was like this massive digression each time. But yeah, he went on to be with the Lord on July 27th, 1998. And even that, like the lessons, again, when you're in that growth mindset place and you're trying to pull all the good you can from it and you're trying to pull all the lessons. He was in the hospital and he as a pastor and stuff, he was praying, all right, God, take me before I have the ability to lose the ability to speak.
Wow.
Okay. He's like, because he felt I won't have worth if I can't at least verbally use what I'm going through to highlight him, to enhance his kingdom. He thought that's when my value would end. So that's what his prayer was. And he lost the ability to speak, if I remember correctly, sometime around, like clearly speak, I want to say like in between March and May of 98. Okay. So he went on for quite a while with the inability to speak. And so here he was, and they went into the hospital to have a feeding tube put in. My mom is just a rock star. She took care of him and did all this stuff. And they were supposed to go home. And she's in the room packing up all their stuff. And, she goes to wipe some drool away from his face, and there's no response. He'd passed away.
Wow.
And so most people that pass away, Lou Gehrig's disease, pass away from suffocation because it affects your diaphragm.
Okay.
And he passed away when they did the autopsy stuff. His heart had stopped. And ALS does not affect the heart. So it was like, at that point, God was like, all right.
You're good. Yeah.
Sorry. You've done your job.
Yeah.
And like, it took me years to understand why. Because again, it wasn't a why in a negative way. It was a why in like, how can I learn from this way? And there's a very big difference in asking why, right? To understand why God let him go from the time he couldn't speak all the way through. And Bill said it at his funeral. He goes, Lloyd taught us one final lesson. He showed us how a follower of Christ should die. And that started to hit me. But it was years and years and years later. I'm sitting with Chuck Yeager at Boathouse. And he'd lost Tracy, right? And, the question's always like, why do bad things happen to good people? Well, number one, we live in a sinful and broken world, and nobody's immune from it. And when you understand and know that, again, how can you really blame anybody? It's what's going to happen. But number two, my dad died at 51. Okay. And, his testimony was, I got saved at the age of 8, promptly wasted 20 years of my life. I mean, dropped out of high school, 8 years in the Navy, Vietnam, lived the Navy life. After he got out, he started, or towards the end of being out, that's when he met my mom when he was a military police officer and really started focusing on Christ again and, became a pastor. Over 500 people showed up for his funeral. And so it's like, wow, he did so much in this short period of time. What more could have been done with the rest of his life? And I'm sitting there with Chuck and we're talking about this. And that's when it hit me. Like, hold on a second. What if his story, even dying at the age of 51, could do more to impact the kingdom of God, more to bring value to people, more to impact humans than the rest of his life could have done? And then the follow-up question is, how does that happen? And it's people like myself. We now have a responsibility to tell that story, to use those experiences to bring value to others. So if you think about that, you can have 10 people who my dad impacted, let's say, or even just one. Yeah. Like if I'm able to use this story to take the stage and impact the lives of more people than he could have, what if you 10x that? Right? But I think oftentimes many people don't enter into that place to understand the gift that we're given in grief, the gift that we're given in tragedy, the gift we're given in the ability to grow and bring value to others. And it doesn't get realized. And that story then ends instead of being used in a way to positively impact the lives of others. So that was another major aha moment through part of that journey. But that's why I refer to it like that was my second watershed moment in life. I've had 5. But that was a continuation of that. And for those that don't know what a watershed is, it's where water either goes this way or this way. It will never end up, once it goes this direction, it will never end up in this body of water over here. And it's a similar. We have these moments in life that are fundamentally life-changing based on a choice. And once we make that choice, we will never end up back over. It might end up doing some things we could have done in a couple different ways. I'm talking life-changing decisions. Yeah. That choice to grow through it instead of go through it, it changed my life personally. It changed my life from business. I mean, absolutely everything. It added a filter that I cannot exist and function without it running through.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. So, taking that watershed moment, moving forward. So that all transpires for you late 90s. What's next for you? What's the next stop
in the
on
storyline?
The yeah.
So I graduate college. Still very young, immature, and everything else. Started working at Wildman in 2000. Another major component of what shaped me, Steve Bryant, was the CEO, and he recently passed away as well. And he's the second most influential person in my life, short of my dad, right? And the 10 plus years I spent there also professionally and personally developed me in big ways. Steve played a massive role in that. The other one was just being around in a company of just great people, right? Great human beings. And so I consider my third watershed moment in life is really where, what kickstarted my change the world is my why, right? What I have literally tattooed on my arm. Can't escape it. So when I started working at Wildman, I'd been friends with Josh and, wakeboarding and going on Youth Christ ski trips. And I knew the Wildman family a little bit. And I knew they did, quote, good things with the money they made from the company. I had no idea details and stuff. But as I worked there and started in sales and became sales manager, we doubled the size of the company in 3.5 years. It was a 5-year strategic plan that we finished in 3.5 years. And we had a celebratory meeting at the upper room at the Boathouse restaurant. And we went through the numbers, right? And I can't tell you all the numbers and everything. I can't remember most of it. But at one point, Karen got up and said, hey, as leadership, we want you guys to know some of the good things that's happening around the world because of the job that you're doing. And the Wildmans, as I know you guys know them, they're very private individuals. They don't ever want any kind of like pat on the back aspect of things. So they'd always kept this stuff very, very close to the chest. And they went through and talked about the well drilling trucks in Africa with Water for Good, which I kind of knew a little bit. They just went into more detail. But then there was one story where they had supported an orphanage in Romania. Again, kind of knew about that. And through that, though, they found out, now remind you, this is back in 2003. Okay. And I don't know where Romania sits today, but at least back then, their government was much more, I don't know, call it bad, in Romania. And so the laws in Romania are way different. Obviously adoption rules, all the different stuff, healthcare and everything. So they had found out, and the way it was back then is that a woman could come into a hospital and give birth to a baby, leave the baby and just leave. Right? Like abandon the baby. So if you Google like child abandonment in Romania, you see it's still a problem, but it was way more rampant back then. So now you have this child abandonment issue at this hospital. And then you combine that with the lack of resources in healthcare. So what the Wildmans had found out through this orphanage that they supported, that a hospital would take these abandoned babies that they didn't have the resources to care for, and then they would wheel these abandoned babies into an abandoned wing of the hospital on Friday. And then Monday morning, they'd open up the doors, and whichever ones are still alive, they'd bring them back in and care for them.
Wow.
Okay, and this would go on week after week, step and repeat until, as they got old enough, they'd then go to orphanages. And that's kind of one of those things you hear and you can't unhear.
Right.
Well, they stepped into that and said, we have the power to do something. So Wildman as a company started paying wages, supplies, and everything else to take care of those abandoned babies in that abandoned wing of the hospital. And in that moment, that's where it hit me. Like there's the idea of like you can do good through business, but then you can have purposeful awareness that you can change lives. And I remember looking, it was one, again, that's why I call it my third watershed moment. I remember looking down at the carpet, the yellowish beige walls, and going, oh my gosh, I'm not out here selling uniforms, napkins, and mats. I'm saving lives.
Wow.
And it forever changed what I felt when I went to work. And I also almost instantaneously had that passion ignited in me to say, I want every single person to feel this too. From the janitor to the CEO, right? We all do the exact same thing one time a day. We all wake up, swing our feet off to the side of the bed, and our feet hit the ground. And in those split seconds, we're either happy and excited about what we're going to go do or we're not. And the power that comes with purpose and fulfillment through the workplace can change all of that. And that's really what started to ignite the idea that businesses in my opinion, is the greatest untapped vertical for personal fulfillment and purpose.
Yeah.
And so if businesses can create opportunities to feel what I felt in that moment, that's an absolute game changer. And it's, when you really understand that, it improves performance, all your KPIs, it decreases turnover. It's all the reasons what companies are looking for today to how do I retain and attract top talent? People want more than a paycheck. So how do you give it to them as a fundamental piece of corporate culture? And so, that's the why. I have changed the world. And so it can be on a micro level from putting a smile on somebody's face that needs it today, or having a conversation, an opportunity like this that somebody hears and goes, oh my goodness, we can do that in our business. And the residual trickle effect, I may never even know. Don't care. Don't need to. It's why I do what I do.
Wow.
So that but even that was 2003. So there's still a lot of like momentum and springboarding that takes place. But again, it all goes back to that choice to grow through it.
Yeah.
If I don't think I chose to grow through it back then, number one, I guarantee you I'm not sitting here today. Number two, I don't even know if I would have experienced that moment with the filter that I had to understand and realize that impact. Does that make sense? These things kind of stack on each other.
Yes.
And that's why like when I do speaking and even whether I'm talking about customer experience or sales performance or leadership development, it's all anchored in that choice to grow through it and identifying 5 key characteristics of people that are on that journey. And it impacts absolutely everything.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is why we love doing this, right? Because it's like I've known you for years, and I've watched up close and sometimes watched from afar through social media, and I've seen how you operate and the ways that you communicate and this constant idea of growth mindset and change the world. And now I understand why. All the way back to that moment, in the late 90s of go through it or grow through it. And now it's like, it just gives me this lens to understand you in a way that I really hadn't before. So incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Well, and it's so great too to be able to take, your story, your life journey, and be able to like look at that in ours and like how do we filter, you know, our lives through as we hear that story? Because there's a lot of people who may listen to this and they're like, you know, that's awesome. That's not my story. Or it's like, that's not, you know, I haven't gone through something. 'Cause it's so easy to take that like mindset of, yeah, it's great. You get up as early as you do and you do all these things. That's not me.
Yeah. And well, and here's the amazing thing about that. You don't have to wait for tragedy.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And that's one of the things that I speak about. Like I could be on stage, talk to hundreds of people about that. And in that moment, that person sitting in the seat has the power to say, I'm going to choose to grow through the rest of my life, or I'm going to choose to go through the rest of my life. You don't have to wait for a tragedy or this momentous thing. And like what I found is like when people choose to grow through it, I think it provides a balance where the lows in life aren't so low and the highs in life aren't so high. Like we've all seen that. Somebody experiences that Super Bowl moment and they crash because they're not at this balanced place to take it on. They do experience the worst day of their life and they're not equipped to handle it. And it can spin off in 100 different directions. It's kind of like one of those trick questions I like to ask an audience of people is by a show of hands, how many people have experienced the best day of their life, right? And then I ask on the flip side, how many of you guys experienced the worst day of your life? And what's funny is not everybody's hands gets raised in those two questions. And it's kind of a trick question. And I go back to them and say, at this point in time, you have experienced both.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It doesn't mean if I ask you that same question 25 years from now, that both of those days will be the exact same ones you're thinking of today. Guarantee you probably will have a worse day for most of you in the room than what we've had. Are you prepared to handle it?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where you are in life. Maybe you've never had a loss of a parent or a child or somebody super close to you. You will at some point in time.
Yeah. Man, so good. How would you encourage, like, someone wants to take that like active step? Because that is like, I mean, I mean, you talk about a filter, it's a mind shift of like looking through what are some of those like tangible for you, like, because you still have those days where you feel overwhelmed, ill-equipped, like, man, like, I don't know if I have the energy to grow through this today.
Yep.
It's like, what are some of those things that you've found in your experience? Like,
so again, this comes from years of kind of stacking stuff onto it. So like I said, I've identified 5 key characteristics of people who are on that journey. Okay. And those are some of the things that help. Number 1, continuous learner. Like you really enter into this humble place with confidence of like, until the day I die, I'm going to be learning. Like the people that kind of think I know it all and you know, whatever, you're limiting actually your opportunities to grow and everything, right? Because you're not seeing different things happen before your eyes because you're already there. Okay. So number 1 characteristic is being a continuous learner. Huge. Yeah. Because even when I enter that day, I'm like, okay, what can I learn from this? Okay, what can I go draw on as a resource to help me get through it? Number 2, rooted in gratitude. So people that are on this journey enter this place of like extreme gratitude ownership. And it took me a while to get there. And there's some days I don't feel that. But one of the easiest steps that somebody can do is just start a gratitude journal. And I did that back in like 2012. Again, that's one of the things I did was I just every single day wrote down 3 things I'm grateful for. Try not to repeat it, but it could be something as simple as like the sunrise this morning. It doesn't have to be magnificent and like huge and deep. Just what 3 things impacted me today that I can say I'm grateful for that moment. I'm grateful for a conversation. Grateful for dinner tonight, whatever it is, right?
Access to water, like all these. So many
And then
things.
usually like, hey, one thing I want to think about or pray about, right? And so I did that for months, and that really helped shift my mindset to being in a more thing and being able to find automatically without having to do it, little things throughout the day that I'm grateful for. The third thing is, so I'm trying to go off the top of my head here without having any of my notes in it. The third thing is resiliency. Okay. So people who are on this journey develop a resiliency. And I know resiliency is thrown out a lot. It's really, really important from a lot of different perspectives. But because of those other 2 and because of the idea of growth, resiliency isn't, in my mind, the same as people that say I'm resilient. It's the understanding that, no, I'm not just going to stand there and take it. It's understanding I am going to get knocked down. And when that happens, it's not a matter of if, it's when that happens, how am I getting back on one knee? How am I getting back on 2 feet? You know what I mean? And having the knowledge and the strength of like, that will be me. When it happens, that will be me. The 4th thing is understanding how to play the long game. And this is the number one thing. If I could go back and have a conversation with the 16 to 22-year-old Keith for 5 minutes, it's not who wins the Super Bowl, like Marty McFly or anything else like that, right? Like, it's literally going, I want to ingrain this into your head, how to play the long game and what that means. And so people that are on this journey start, whether they consciously think about it or not, they understand, like, I'm at this point, I'm 46. I expect to live to be in my 90s. Okay, and as medicine continues to advance, who knows what that can be. So when you lay life out as a timeline and you go, from here to here, I did this. And we talked about, like, in the 90s and 2012, like, I could wake up tomorrow and be like, I hate everything I'm doing and I want to become a lawyer.
Yeah.
And I could go back to law school and I could have an awesome law career for 20 years. I mean, like, life, like, everybody thinks, and it creates this immense amount of unhappiness of these expectations that I have to be here at this certain time. Man, you have such a long game in front of you. And when you lay that out, again, that really helps bring balance at, yeah, today kind of sucks, but the reality is it's like this microscopic blip. And as long as I don't do something that really derails me for what I can do in the future, like, just get up and do it again the next day. So understanding how to play the long game and having that perspective. And then the fifth thing is really understanding the power of influence. And the power of influence, I think, is absolutely critical, because it kind of coincides a little bit with continuous learning. So the what I consume, how I challenge my inputs, what I choose to put in, right, is one of those things of understanding the power of influence. But it's also understanding I have the power to influence the lives of others, and others have the power to influence the lives of me. So who am I choosing to surround myself with? Who are the people that I have, if I were to be in a foxhole when it hits the fan, like, who do I want in there with me? Who are my closest circle of people? And I think those are the things that when you do experience those days that you just don't quite feel it. Yeah. And you have the freedom and flexibility to pick up the phone and call one of those people, and they're there to help lift you up, man. Understand the power of that is absolutely incredible. So those 5 things kind of really help move that journey, and how you deal with the hard days, you deal with the great days with more balance and more long game perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I always think about, like, the seasons of life, and it's like you're going to have, and sometimes those seasons, it truly is a season. Sometimes you have multiple seasons in a day. It's like you can start your day and you come out of a first meeting or something that's rough, and it's like, okay, is that going to define the rest of my day? Or am I going to be like, yeah, I'm going to grow through this? Gratitude is my huge thing, because I'm going to say it's impossible to be, like, in a negative headspace whenever you're practicing gratitude.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so anytime, whenever I'm feeling this, like, run down, stressed, it's like where you start to feel that weight. It's just like trying to flip, okay, what am I grateful for? What are those little things today that, like, that it just flips that mindset that starts to get you thinking of, like, okay, how am I going to grow through this?
Yep.
I love all those.
Awesome. So you started your career, obviously you're with Wildman for a number of years. That had a huge impact on you. And then, I know you were with PayProTech working for other people. Yep. I remember a conversation with you where you said, I'm kind of pushing all the chips in and I'm betting on myself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in 2022, well, actually it really started in 2020.
Okay.
When COVID hit and everything kind of got reset. At the time I was working for North American Bank Card, and I was in charge of, like, some different partner programs and the partner experience, and I was doing training events and everything. And so one of those events, we would put together these road shows. It was in Atlanta, and we're literally in Atlanta when everything started really turning sideways. We were almost going to go to the last NBA game that night. Okay. Yeah. So here we are in Atlanta doing this event. I have 25, 30 partners there, and the NCAA tournament's getting canceled. We don't know what's going on, and this is a big part of my job, right? And I'm going, okay, in April I have this event in Miami. I have another one in Vegas. Like, what if events start getting canceled? Like, what do I do? Like, how do I continue to bring value to others? Like, what does this look like? And I kind of started wrapping in my head, and I realized it was either sitting in the airport or on the plane, because I was taking notes in both. I remember doing that, going, hold on a second. Do I have to be present in the room to bring value to others? And I started mapping out what it would look like to take these in-person road shows virtual.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm writing this stuff on the airplane, and we have all of these different vendors and people who would sponsor and participate in these. And I drafted this email that I then sent the next day saying, hey, we don't know what's going to happen, but if this looked like something that we could put together and start doing virtual events, would that be something you'd be interested in? And it was this massive, overwhelming yes from all like 40 different companies I sent this to. So then I'm trying to go, okay, I've got to approach my boss at this and sell him on the idea. And at this point, yeah, like St. Patrick's Day is canceled. I mean, we're talking like we're at this moment right now, you know what I mean? Like 4 years ago. And we're going into it, and I have to like sell them on this whole idea of I can do this virtually. And at this point, things are getting quarantined, but I had jumped on Amazon and bought like a $200 light kit with a backdrop and another, webcam and a microphone and like some basic stuff to do what it would take before, eventually it all sold out. Like, you couldn't buy anything for virtual experiences for like months. And we're now on lockdown, and he gives me the green light to go, yeah, go for it. So, I grab, at this point, you're not like, everything's closed. You're not going anywhere. I'm in my garage grabbing 2x4s and old curtain rods. And fortunately, I'd grabbed the backdrop from our sales conference, and I had that. And I make this set in my basement. And literally the first one, I'm using a Brio 2 camera, like webcam, and I've got 2 different cameras up and using GoToMeeting. And so in a matter of like, I think it was like 10 days, I organized this. I don't know and please, if somebody corrects me when I'm wrong, I'm totally fine with that. It was the first ever virtual sales conference, at least in the payment space. And so on April 7th and 8th, and we did it for free because they was like, you're going to charge? I was like, no. And this is really where I started getting into that value aspect of things. Nope, everybody's at home. We just give this to them. We have people that don't have anything else to do. They're sitting at home. We have a captive audience. And so on April 7th and 8th, did a 2-day sales conference. And if I remember correctly, we had over 350 attendees. We had, I think it was like 19 sessions with 14 outside companies, and then I did the other ones, and then 2 keynote speakers also that did it for free as well. Robin Phillips from Brains on Fire and the amazing Ryan Estes, who was our keynote at the conference in 2019. Yeah. So it was... you look at the virtual things that people do now and stuff like this and stages, like if you were to look at that content, it's so amateur hour, but the impact was real, right? And the value is real. And that's where I walked away from that going, I'm actually kind of good at this. And getting virtual, it's one thing to stand up in front of 20 people and hone that skill, and then 200, but to then get on camera and knowing on the computer there's 300 people on here, but you're not seeing any of them. Like, it really helped me step into like embracing this authenticity of who I am. It doesn't matter whether you're looking through a camera or you're in front of 1,000 people. Like, you can do this. And then that kind of springboarded some opportunities to be on some podcasts. And I started doing whole virtual events once a month, doing a virtual road show. And then eventually we went back face to face. Those became hybrid. And so, but in 2020, I realized, I'm like, I love this. Like, I have a passion for bringing value to people in a bigger way than just my job. Yeah. What does it look like for me to eventually be able to walk away from this? And I'm not talking in a negative way or anything else, just like, what does it look like? What do I have to do to say it's time for me to just do this? I knew my potential, and I speak a lot around the idea of maximize your potential through that growth mindset journey. I knew my potential was capped as long as I worked for somebody else. But I also knew not quitting tomorrow, right? I there was going to take steps on this. So it really started a 2-year process of what does it look like to continue to invest in myself from an education perspective and different opportunities, to bring the best that I can to every single thing I'm doing for my corporate employer, to both improve on me, hit my integrity of doing what I'm doing to get paid for, and then some, but also understanding that as I did that, that would build equity that I could cash in outside of it, right? And then also financially preparing myself to be able to pay the bills when I take that step. So that's what happened in 2022. I hit that point, and I remember the moment I was in, it was April, and I was out in Arizona for the Global Leadership President's Gathering, and I was talking to a gal, and she oversees like a bunch of the international youth stuff, and we started talking about like this growth mindset, and she's like, would you ever be interested in potentially doing some content for us? And which unfortunately I have not done. Life is just a little bit too crazy, and I have some stuff I'm working on that hopefully will be accepted someday. But as she asked me that, I'm going, this is amazing, and I want to say yes, but I have zero margin to say yes. Like, here's everything that I want to do to be able to bring impact and value to other people. And in that moment, I knew, I'm like, it's time. It's time. it's time to start to make that exit. So I resigned in July of 2022. My last day was in August. And yeah, so that's when I made that conscious decision to go in all in on me, right? At that point, I just opened the store, and so I was able to step into that instead of employees doing it, and focus on the consulting, really step into that speaking, training, and in my own portfolio, tried at 21 and just let it go. Let's see where it's going. And in 2021, that October, was my first real, I talked about like investing in, even while I was a corporate employee, investing in myself. So things like the Global Leadership Summit, and taking those opportunities to put that type of content and development into myself. And then I chose to do my first ever professional speaking boot camp. And the group is now Impact 11, but it was 3 Ring Circus back there. And I went to, it cost me $8,000 between the boot camp, travel, and hotel to attend this 2-day boot camp in Nashville, Tennessee. And it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And what it did was, from a speaking perspective, it showed me how much work I still had to do. And like, in so many ways, like, wow, I'm way further off than I thought I was. But in other ways, it was like, I'm actually closer in some ways, but I now have this action plan. I have this runway that I feel is shortened. But because of the other things in life, again, playing the long game, it's not like I have these expectations. So I even talked to Ryan Estes, who was there. I said, I now have an action plan. I'm going to know when it's time to take the next step. And so that happened this last year in 2023. So, I was able to do a keynote for a group in Hawaii. And then I did a keynote talk for EPI at their Impact Conference in Orlando. And, 400 people in there. And it was founded, again, it's the growth mindset foundation, plus then applying it from the payments perspective in a certain program. And when I walked, both while it was in process and walking off that stage, it just felt so clean. I could feel the impact that was happening in the room, right? And when the CEO and Mike walks up and goes, "Man, that was so good." He's like, "I'm so glad I don't have to go after that." Like, it was that, like, all right, it's time. And I'm literally 5 minutes later texting Ryan, and I knew that because I get emails. They have another boot camp and masterclass in Scottsdale in December. I'm like, so Scottsdale, huh? And so I invested again in myself, joined the community for Impact 11, and went all in on that. Attended boot camp and masterclass just to continue to develop myself, not just as a speaker, not just as somebody to bring value to others, but I also can apply it to other businesses. Because the concepts, I just did a masterclass in San Diego with Peter Sheehan, and he's dropping some bombs, and I'm applying that as more than just a speaker. I'm like, that's applicable over here. That's applicable over here as well with the different things that I'm into. And it's such a fun place to be able to recognize my goal of being the best version of myself continues to move forward. I'm the most. If people go, flaws. I'll raise my hand. I'll stand at the front of the line. I am so far from perfect. I am a sinner. I am broken. I fail every single day. I fail some of the closest people that have in my life. You know what I mean? But part of that self-awareness, I think, is absolutely critical. And it's just, but I want to continue to take those steps to be the better version of me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're growing through those failures. It's
Correct.
like, that we're going to fail. That's just part of life, but we're going to continue to grow through that. And I get excited thinking about as you're pouring into the self-development, it's not just for you to be a better, just for you. It's because that you're going to be able to impact other people and pour into their lives. And it's just this this cycle of making the world a better place, changing the world.
Yep.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So this year, my word is discomfort.
Okay.
And I kind of started settling into that a little while ago, but to what you're saying is, to make the world a better place, to bring value to other people, to stretch yourself to be the best version of you, to do that, guess what? It's not going to be comfortable. And I was consuming Mike Todd's book, A Crazy Faith, as I was preparing for my first half marathon. I'm running a 7-mile run on the strip back in, this would have been April of 2022, right? Yeah. And I'm listening to it, and he has a line in that book, "Nothing great comes from being comfortable." And that was really kind of that springboard into, okay, I like that. And that's very, very true. Fast forward through last year, I read David Goggins' books, and one of them I did twice.
Oh, yeah.
I pushed myself in my second half marathon. I really started embracing discomfort. And then the last book I consumed was Sterling Hawkins' book, Hunting Discomfort. That was my last book for 2023. And as I finished that book, I'm like, that's my word for 2024. For me to continue to move into stuff, I have to purposely hunt and embrace discomfort, welcome it, find it, because he has an amazing line in that book. It goes something along like, on the other side of discomfort is not only growth, but life's greatest experiences. And when you think about those memories, some of those things that you do, it's in the face of discomfort that pushes us and makes it through. And when you do it, when you accomplish it, it's those foundational core experiences that you have.
Yeah. So for people listening who are, maybe at this place of, I want to take a step of development in my life, or maybe I'm at this intersection of this watershed moment, like you described. It can go one way or the other.
Yep.
What's your encouragement?
Don't run from it, number one. I think that's the easiest thing to do is, again, it's that idea of discomfort and people being used to wanting to be comfortable. I think when you have those moments, you are going to feel uncomfortable making that choice. What is it? The road less traveled, that path less traveled is traveled by few, because it can be a little bit more difficult. So I think that's kind of one of those first things is if you really want to step into the idea of I'm going to grow through life instead of go through it, you've got to be with the understanding that guess what? Yeah, it's not going to be comfortable a lot of the times. And it may get really darn uncomfortable at moments. I was listening to a book recently and and they had this great analogy. And like if you and your friends hang out and drink, right? They're the friends you hang out with when you're outside drinking, hanging out, and all of a sudden you decide, I'm not going to drink anymore. What usually happens in those types of circles, right? You kind of dissipate off. Guess what? That may move you into a better version of yourself. And that's going to be incredibly uncomfortable. I'm using that kind of as a way, I'm not saying that hey man, I'm a fan of good tequila and wine and stuff. So I'm just using that as an analogy of how life can change, even in your social circles and everything else. When you say, I need to make a choice to be a better version of me, whatever that looks like. So number one, understand that that's going to be uncomfortable. Number two, the sooner you can get a little bit authentic and vulnerable with somebody that you can trust, whether it's even a therapist or whatever, to have that person in your corner to where you feel the struggle that will exist, like find that person. Like community is such a critical thing for personal development. And I've got different communities in my life based on some of the different things that I'm doing. And having that support structure will help you deal with imposter syndrome, the feeling of like, I don't deserve a seat at this table, or I don't belong here, I'm not good enough, or, help realize that comparison should never exist. Like you're on your own journey. Like having a community around you is really, really important for those steps. And then I would say the third is just understand like that idea of the long game. Is don't put the expectations that you need to be somewhere at any given time on a certain timeline. It's why I love goals and not expectations. And so to clearly define that, an expectation is like, let's say I want to be here. Great. That's a goal. I want to be here by this time. That's an expectation. So what happens if you get 90% by that time and you don't hit it? The natural side of expectations not realized is disappointment. Disappointment breeds unhappiness. Unhappiness and growth can't coexist. You could have been another month and you would have been exactly where you wanted to be. So the idea of having goals without the expectations means allow yourself that time to grow. Don't put the expectation of like, okay, I'm choosing this. This means I should be here by this point in time and then here. No. Let that course take itself. Because the truth is there's variables that happen in our life that are way outside of our control. And if you add expectations, it leaves no room for those variables to take place.
Wow.
Yeah. I think of from running and races and stuff, it's like you set an expectation of, I'm going to show up to this race, I'm going to run this time, and then you have a bad race.
Yep.
And it's like, how many people quit at that point?
Yep.
Because it's like they had an expectation, they didn't hit it. But whenever you have that long-term mindset, that's another learning experience for the next race, for the next, you're going to have these ebbs and flows and ups and downs
or an injury.
Yeah.
I mean, I had that recently. I just did my first marathon and my 3 goals. Didn't even have an expectation on time because it was my first one. Finish, don't walk across the finish line, and enjoy making the memory.
Yeah.
And I ended up managing the race really well. I was super happy with it. My last 5 miles were my strongest. I never hit a wall. So there were tons of, because I didn't lay those expectations and try to be at a certain point, man, goal number 3 of enjoying the memory absolutely hit. And along the ways, I did different things. But my second event was supposed to be the Vegas Spartan 10K. And because I did my first Spartan 10K last year and loved it. So I had 5 different ones that I put on the map. So, in January, I hyperextended my right elbow. With that injury, I literally can't do pull-ups. I can't do anything overhead. I'm nursing this thing back. It's a slow recovery. And yeah, I was hoping to get to a place where I could start training for that. And then I just had to realize, I'm not going to go run a race where I'm going to have to run the penalty laps on almost all the obstacles. You know what? Accept it. You couldn't control it. Made the cancellation. Instead, jumped in the San Diego Impact 11 boot camp, which was a way better choice anyways, and just moved on. Accepted, okay, there's a variable that happened. I can't control it. It's going to impact this. Just move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good. I mean, I had recent experience with, I'd been battling, I had the flu multiple times. It was a rough start for me in 2024, coming from someone who takes pride in I don't get sick. That's just not my thing.
Yeah.
And then getting humbled by that, starting off this year. But I was planning on doing Unbound XL, 350-mile bike race, biggest thing I've ever taken on, super excited for it, and then get sick and just training takes a huge hit. And I went through the dark, man, do I even enjoy cycling? I'm never going to get back into this. I had this whole, your mind goes through all those tricks. I'm no, dude, I still love riding my bike. Yeah. I'm just this isn't the season for this. Yep. And so, I had to make the tough call to pull my name from the start line because it's coming up, in May. And I'm there wasn't a point where I could get to the start line and feel good about it.
Yep.
It's the sacrifices and time and commitment and what we've got going on at work and everything and at home. I'm just this isn't the season, but it doesn't mean that it's not a future season. It's that, shifting back into that long-term mindset of hey, how do I enjoy and just fall in love with being on my bike again? And so, so I can relate to that because it's, sometimes those are some tough decisions whenever you do have an injury or things come up that you're not expecting.
Yeah.
But choosing to grow through it.
But I was saying, it's that filter, right? Yeah. It's having that filter in place. Whereas I've seen plenty of other people that may not have that filter in place, and something that happens and it rocks them. You know what I mean? And I've talked about it changed my life personally and professionally, but it's like I said, it's all aspects. In fact, one of the things I've been toying around with to help emphasize this on stage is the idea of having a pitcher of water and 2 bowls, right? And then having 2 different screens, like a filter, and talking about, hey, with some people who aren't on this journey, and you pour your water through the filter that exists today and it comes out clear the other side. There's no change, right? And then I got to figure out how, but somehow have that filter have some kind of blue dye in it. And the idea of pouring that pitcher, and as it runs through the filter, it fills the bowl in blue. You know what I mean? And the idea is this is the filter. Life is the water. Life is going to happen.
Yep. Yes.
And the filter that you apply it through changes what comes out on the other side.
Yeah. That's so good. You mentioned a moment ago imposter syndrome, and that's something that we all struggle with to some degree. So 4 years ago, you're turning on a webcam, starting your first virtual thing, to now you're standing on stages for hundreds of people. Talk to me about that imposter syndrome and what that looks like for you and how you navigate through it.
Yeah. So, the reality is, and Peter Sheehan said it at the San Diego boot camp, new studies show all professionals experience some form of imposter syndrome. Some people might just try to lock it in a closet, right? And that can become unhealthy.
Absolutely.
So understanding that all professionals, I don't care where you are, what you're doing, entrepreneur to a salesperson to a clerk, it doesn't matter. We all will have, because the reality is human nature wants to apply comparisons. And comparisons are really, really unhealthy. John Acuff has a line that says, don't let the start of your race be somebody else's middle. And I love that because that's the easy thing for people to do. And so if you allow comparisons to creep in, that's really sets the start of that imposter syndrome. So here I am at the San Diego boot camp. I'm at the start of my professional speaking career. And there are people Smiley is sitting next to me. Dude is awesome. Like, and he talks all about belonging. I mean, his positive energy, like I could easily compare myself to him and be like, I don't belong at this table. I mean, you look at Peter Sheehan, I'm up here giving a masterclass on this, and the quality of the people, thought leaders, authors, you know, any one of those experiences is some of the best I've had in the last couple of years. I could easily sit there and go, this is my room. Like, I don't belong here. No, I belong here. I'm just in a different place in the journey. And that's an incredibly powerful thing to do, because and especially in a community like that literally is helping everybody move along forward on their journey. It's, you know, it's something to behold. And I think competitiveness in a lot of industries, a lot of spaces, creates unhealthy aspects of it. I think, you know, when people feel like I said, I'm turning on my camera, like you said, I'm turning on my camera 4 years ago for the first time. I was also at a place of like, well, if I kind of screw this up, it is what it is, you know? So like, I have a little bit of that, like sometimes nerdy, just go with it, you know, kind of a thing. Yeah. So that kind of helps, but no, still stepping on stages is like, oh my gosh, but a big piece of that is not making it about yourself. And I've watched this on a regular basis. I'll see not speakers like from Impact 11. Like part of that is like, and understanding like when you're taking the stage, it's not about you. It's not about your story. It's not about attention on you. It's about using those stories, using your message to impact the lives of others and move them forward. And the difference between a quality speaker, and we could probably, if you're listening to this, you could probably think of people that I've seen, heard, or whatever, and realize that was the difference. They got up there and made it about them instead of making it about the people in the audience. And so like even that first time turning on the camera, you know, I'm in my basement. My son helped me build a stage. Like this is not about me. And it's about bringing, again, value to others. And same thing, you take that stage and whether it's 10 people or 1,000 people, it's the same message because it's coming across with passion and the desire to impact those lives. So the audience size at that point doesn't really matter because you're doing it with the right intentions and you're doing it from the right place.
So good, man. I love that. Absolutely love that. Gosh. Well, Keith, this has been amazing as we kind of wrap up our time here. Talk to us about future. What are you excited about? What are you dreaming about?
Oh man. So the here and now is actually a little bit stressful because of having like, especially Surv being in the startup phase and being like, okay, got this capital investment. I just chose, I just signed on to do this CRM. I'm investing money and it's got to, I mean, there's pieces of that. But that's reality. If you're going to, again, it's uncomfortable. I'm stepping in and embracing that discomfort in the season of this. So the future of me is continuing to be able to say yes to the opportunities that are the right ones, but also understanding that there are going to be times I have to say no. And I think part of, and this goes into the customer experience side of things too, I teach and tell people, if you want to provide an incredible customer experience, you have to know who you are. You equally have to know who you're not.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you have to be able to say no. So the future for me, it has to be a little bit more strategic on what I say yes to and what I say no to, because I have so much going on, right? I have to keep some margin. I have to, especially with kids and life and everything else, I have to keep some margin in place. So I can break it down to where, again, the Trident, the client services, that consumes in this season the least amount of my time. Cloud9, I was able to develop that within 11 months to where I can run it without being in it. I have an amazing team. So I work in there on certain days. I still do the marketing and the ordering and overall strategy, but I don't have to be in it for them to execute on the amazing experience they're doing. A majority of my time right now is the Surv side of things. But then it's also, when you go back to the speaking and some of the other stuff, is I'm entering the season of intentional reps. And by intentional reps, I mean making sure that I'm out there finding opportunities to give this story with intention. Whereas the last couple years, hey, do you want to speak about this topic? Yeah, that sounds great. Hey, do you want to be on this panel? Yes, that sounds great. And you're getting the reps in to help strengthen your on-stage experience and skills and the eloquence of it all and exposure, to now being like, hey, I need to do this with intentionality and working in that growth mindset story. Even if I'm like being invited in a payments thing to speak about a certain topic, how do I still filter it through that with intentionality? And really kind of move into that next phase of that career. Because, 5 or 6 years from now, the Keith that can take the stage then is going to look very different than the one that does it today. So how are the things that I'm doing today, like putting that Keith in a better place to have more impact in the lives of
building
others?
Into that. Yeah.
So good. So good.
Awesome. Awesome. Man, how can our listeners engage with you, connect with you? What's the best way for people
LinkedIn.
to find you?
I'm most active on LinkedIn and Instagram. And so on Instagram, I've got a few different profiles, but the I Am Keith Sampson one, that's the professional one. That's where I throw the value out. I do my Monday Minute or Fives on both of those. And, that was one of those things, again, it started from the intent of bringing value, and I did it in a closed Facebook group. And then I made the mistake a couple times on flipping like all audiences instead of just the Facebook group. So I hit like my personal Facebook, and then I started getting comments, not realizing like, this is so good. But I'm like, oh, maybe I just need to start doing this for like everybody. Yeah. And again, it's, that idea of stepping into that discomfort. Yeah. I'm now throwing a piece of content out there for the world to see and open the doors for judgment or whatever else. But when you do it with the intention of, I don't care about the likes. I don't care about the haters. If one person finds value from it, just one, man, it was worth it. It was worth anything that could come from it to bring, one value when you're doing it from positive. So, I mean, when I travel, I might be off a day, but I've been doing it every single Monday now, I think for like 3 years. And it's just, a Monday Minute or Five. So it's like around a minute, usually around 3, but it's always less than 5 minutes, just of a thought or a way to bring value. So yeah, jump on Instagram, LinkedIn, you'll find me there.
Perfect.
Yeah, we'll put those in the show notes. But yeah, I mean, I can personally test that. I mean, I've texted you on some of those, be like, man, like so good. Because it's, you never know where people are at. Yeah. And so like you just being consistent and constantly is putting out that like you are touching people's lives and hitting them, and it's going to get used. So I appreciate your consistency and attention to keeping that going, because it's fantastic. I've been in a couple spots where it's like a dark day or something, kicking it off the week, and I see those pop up, and it's just life-giving, and it's always good perspective. So I appreciate it.
Well, and that's why I do it on Mondays. Like one of my things, like Mondays is my favorite day of the week. And that usually is counterculture. Everybody wants a Friday or Saturday, right? Yeah. I look at Mondays as being like, I get to set the tone for the rest of the week.
Love that.
The way that I wake up and approach today determines the rest of the week. And if you have a great week and then you go into the weekend after a great week, come on.
Awesome.
Yes. Awesome. Amazing. Last thing I want to ask real quick
is,
so you said last year you had 25 books.
Yeah.
Right? So what favorite read and what are you currently reading?
Okay. So currently, and again, this is the fun thing about consuming books. Sometimes things hit with the timeliness of it, right?
Yep.
So right now I am reading, consuming Think Ahead by Craig Rochelle.
Okay.
And that one in the season of life, like personally and some of the other stuff, has been a like, really? I didn't want to hear this, but I'm really glad I did. I mean, that one has been a freaking home run, like where I'm at in my season of life from a couple different perspectives. Favorite read last year? I would say the most impactful one, because when it came to business and what I was doing through with Surv and everything else, was Working Geniuses.
Okay.
Yeah, that one was great. And then I said that I got to throw a shout out again to Sterling Hawkins, that last book. And it was on my list to want to read. And then I met him in person at the masterclass in Scottsdale. And I'm like, all right, I've got to hurry up and finish these other books. I'm going to add this one to the end of the year.
Yeah.
And I did, and I'm so glad I did. But I mean, I consumed Ryan Leake, John Acuff. Like there were so many good books. I don't know if I can like really go, this was the best one last year. Because they all played a role,
right?
Comfort Crisis. Like again, all of those different things. Like if I hadn't done Comfort Crisis and David Goggins' books, then I wouldn't have had the filter I did when I read, Hunting Discomfort. You know what I mean? So like
they all build on each other.
And when you're constantly consuming content like that and doing it in a way through the continuous learning like filter that like I have always ways to improve and learn. I'm not just doing pages to say, hey, I finished another book. Right. You know what I mean? I'm like constantly trying to be better.
Yeah.
They stack and they change the filter of how you perceive them and everything else.
No, I think that's the key, being that curious mindset that I'm always learning. I mean, that just sets you up for so much success. So Keith, we love you, man. Thank you so much.
Likewise.
For spending time with us, sharing your story. I know it's going to have an impact and continue to have an impact. So thank you for the way you live your life. You're a huge part of our story and forever will be. So we really appreciate you.
Likewise, guys. You keep crushing it, and keep telling people stories, keep creating amazing content, and doing the work for others. It's needed.
Awesome. All right. For all our listeners, thanks for joining us today. Check out Keith, find him on social media, and we will see you next time on Dream On Studios, Stories That Move. Thanks so much. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Stories That Move, brought to you by Dream On Studios.
Make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the next episode. And remember, if you or your organization have a story you're eager to share with the world, Dream On Studios is here to bring that story to life.
Don't hesitate to reach out. You can find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or visit our website at dreamonstudios.io. We understand how overwhelming it can be trying to bring your vision and story to life, but that's why we exist, and we've walked alongside hundreds of clients doing that very thing.
Yeah. We believe every story has the potential to inspire, to move, and to make a difference. Let's make yours heard.
Until next time, keep moving forward and keep telling those stories that matter.
Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time on Stories That Move.